The silent passenger. The train was nearly empty. Just a few passengers scattered across the dimly lit carriages, their faces hidden behind phones or books. The rhythmic clatter of wheels on rails was almost soothing. Almost. I noticed him the moment he stepped on. A tall, gaunt man in a dark coat, his face obscured by the brim of a battered hat. He didn't sit. Instead, he stood perfectly still at the far end of the carriage, hands clasped together, staring straight ahead. His posture was unnervingly rigid, like a mannequin propped up in a display. At first, I thought he was just another late-night commuter. Maybe he missed his stop. Maybe he was lost in thought. But then the lights flickered, just for a second, and when they came back on, he was closer. Not walking, just closer. I looked around. No one else seemed to notice. The teenager with headphones was still bobbing his head to music. The woman with the book hadn't even glanced up. I swallowed hard, my pulse quickening. The train entered a tunnel, and the lights flickered again. This time longer. The darkness stretched for what felt like minutes. My breath hitched. When the light returned, he was standing right beside me. His breath smelled of something ancient, something rotten. My body tensed. I couldn't move, couldn't scream. His lips parted, and in a voice that barely rose above a whisper, he said, "You shouldn't be here." A cold wave of dread swept over me. Before I could react, the train screeched. My stomach lurched as the brakes engaged violently, throwing me forward. I grabbed the nearest pole to steady myself, my heart hammering against my ribs. And when I looked up, he was gone. I gasped, searching the carriage, but the other passengers were still there, unfazed. No one had reacted. No one had noticed. The doors hissed open at a station I didn't recognize. No signs, no announcements, just a platform bathed in sickly yellow light. And standing on it was him, watching me. The doors began to close. My instincts screamed at me to stay put, to let the train carry me away from whatever he was. But then, a flicker. The dim lights buzzed and faltered, and for a split second, his face changed. His skin too smooth, his eyes hollow voids, his mouth stretching wider than humanly possible. And then darkness. I barely had time to think. The doors were closing, and I had a choice: jump out and face him, or stay on the train, trapped with something even worse. My body moved before my brain caught up. I lunged toward the doors, barely slipping through before they slammed shut behind me. The train rumbled away into the void, leaving me standing alone on the platform. Or not alone. The air was thick, damp. The walls of the station were old, cracked, covered in something that might have been moss or something else. The digital screens, the ones that usually displayed arrival times, were black, flickering with static. And he was there, not moving, not blinking, just standing at the other end of the platform. A sound made me whip my head around a dull, wet, scraping noise. My stomach turned. The escalators weren't working, but something was moving up there, just beyond the broken lights. A slow, dragging sound, like something heavy being pulled across the floor. I turned back to the man, my breath ragged. He was closer, not walking, just closer. My legs screamed at me to move, but I couldn't. Then something whispered, not from him, from the walls. The cracks in them, deep and pulsing, as if something inside was whispering my name. I staggered back, heart pounding. The train was gone. The tunnel it disappeared into stretched endlessly, blacker than anything I'd ever seen. And the scraping noise, it was getting closer. I had to run. I turned, sprinting toward the nearest stairwell. My shoes slapped against the grimy tile, my breath coming in ragged gasps. The station stretched too far, longer than it should have been, like it was shifting as I ran. The whispering grew louder. I risked a glance over my shoulder. He was there, too close. I threw myself up the stairs, taking them two at a time, the sound of my own heartbeat thundering in my ears. The exit should be here. It should be. I skidded to a stop. A wall. No doors, no way out. Just a wall where the exit should have been. A single flickering light buzzed overhead. My breath came in shallow gasps. This wasn't real. It couldn't be real. The scraping noise stopped. I turned. He was right there, face inches from mine. His mouth too wide, too empty, too wrong. The last thing I saw was darkness swallowing me whole. The silence,